Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. It's morning my time. My name is Yuki, and I'm the creator of Made by Yuki, which is a clothing line made from upcycled kimonos. And my pronouns are she, her. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the series. So it's planned by myself and the Social Justice Committee of the Twin Cities chapter of JACL, which is the Japanese American Citizens League. And funding has been provided by Les and Karen Suzukamo Fund. And just to recap, I'm going to read our short mission statement. Appreciation versus appropriation is a continuous conversation on cultural ownership that attempts to explore this complex topic in a nuanced way. This conversation will be structured as a series of one-on-one interviews with artists, subject matter experts, and community members speaking from their own perspectives rather than attempting to speak for entire communities or cultures. We do not expect all messaging to be consistent, nor do we expect a consensus to be reached on where the line falls between appropriation and appreciation. Rather, we hope to spark further conversation on the topic. Okay, so as our mission statement says, this is not a session to like draw a line and to give you guys advice about what to do per se. And we have many panelists with very different opinions, and many of them do not even agree with each other. So please keep that in mind. And I hope you can catch up on the rest of the series too, so you can see what everybody has to say. And our goal is really to like provide a platform so that we can have a deeper understanding about cultural ownership and figure out and think about how to better engage respectfully with cultures that are not your own. So today we have Atsushi Tatsuya, who is a Sashiko teacher based in the US. And he was born in Japan in Gifu Prefecture. And in 2015, Atsushi-san and his mother, Keiko, started Upcycle Stitches, which is a website to share their enjoyment of Sashiko. And Atsushi-san now shares his stories and techniques about Sashiko to a wide audience, an international audience, through the website and social media. And in teaching Sashiko, Atsushi-san highlights the importance of understanding Japanese culture and language. So I'm so excited to talk to you live. I've been reading your writing for years, and I'm so appreciative for all the education that you do and sharing your personal perspective about Japanese craft and Sashiko and cultural appropriation at times. And yeah, so thank you so much for making the time to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
So should we just dive straight into the question?
Yes, we can go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so please tell us about your family and their history with Sashiko.
Yes, and I was born in this Sashiko family. And when I say that Sashiko family, it is the family who made a living out of doing Sashiko. So it's kind of rare because we define Sashiko as the ordinary stitching for the necessity. So we are kind of one family that took that culture out of it to make more like a sustainable business as well as the industry. And I was born in that family to pass it down, to heritage that culture. Probably I should explain what Sashiko is real quick, probably. Sashiko is these things you see in the behind is the Sashiko, those hand stitching for the mainly geometric patterns. It does not have to be geometric patterns, but we do use a lot of geometric patterns. And when I have to define Sashiko, we say that the needle work out of ordinary to make the fabric stronger when they could not easily get a replacement for the fabric. For the winter, when they have to, when they only had a thin or rough fabric, they stitch for the making the fabric warmer. When they had a damage on the fabric, they use the needlework to mend it. So all of those needlework activities, we call it Sashiko. So Sashiko is the needlework out of ordinarily in the very harsh condition with limited resources. I don't use the word poverty. Some people define Sashiko as the stitching in poverty, but I don't like defining them as poor because that was their normal. So thanks to my thanks to my mentors teaching me, I now define that Sashiko as the stitching in harsh condition with limited resources. And yes, my family took that culture to more like apply to today's world, and they made the living. So I was raised in the family with many, many artisans around me, about 50, 60 when I was a child. And they made my fate to be the next CEO or leader of that company, which I hated so much. That's why I can speak English right now. I tried to get out from Japan, from that chain of Sashiko. Well, interestingly, I'm back to this, but that's pretty much about my family and how my family related to Sashiko. I hope I answered the question. Good.
Yeah, that's great. So were you doing Sashiko as a kid? Like, did your family teach you?
I don't remember when exactly, but I don't remember the time I cannot stitch. Mm-hmm. That might answer the question. Like, I had to do. I always try to dodge the practice because I hate it so much. But I could not. I don't really understand. Well, when somebody asked me to teach Sashiko, my question was what to teach, because it was very natural for me, and I kind of imagined that everybody could do it. So that's my childhood. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well.
So with your progression, with your relationship with Sashiko, please tell us what you do now. Like if you can give us kind of details about your teaching and workshops.
Yes. So the family itself, I was supposed to probably be in Japan right now in the shop to be next the leader of that family business. But unfortunately, the family went through the internal few, like a little bit of, not a little bit, it's pretty bad disagreement and also the fight. And it got worsened after my father's death in 2013. So it's pretty much the family split it into two based on the philosophy how to protect or how to preserve Sashiko. My grandma's side was more like, let's keep Sashiko by protecting it, by keeping the Sashiko secret. By hiding it, we can keep the traditions. I did not agree with her. I thought that I had to share to preserve this culture. So around 2010, 2011, 12, we were fighting about it, but we were together because of my father. But after my father was gone, it kind of split it, and we got kind of kicked out from the family business. But then I got a freedom to do whatever I wanted. So around 2017, I got a request to teach Sashiko in the trend of boro and also indigo dyeing. And that was the first time. And ever since, I am receiving a lot of requests to teach, which is very fortunate to have. But I don't remember telling myself to be a teacher. It's more like being asked. And what I do right now is to teach Sashiko as well as share the stories around it. Unfortunately, the Sashiko introduced in English right now is not enough. It's not wrong. There are so many books about Sashiko in English, and there's so many teachers teaching Sashiko in English. I don't think they're wrong, but they're missing some of the important part. So I'm trying to fill that gap. And by teaching one specific Sashiko, we might be leaving some other Sashiko behind. And my purpose to teach, my purpose to write those stories every day, my purpose to speak up is to make sure that I can include everybody who committed into this practice in the Japanese history. So yes, I often use this analogy, but anybody here from Chicago? I went to Michigan for the school, so I had a good weekend trip to Chicago, and I want you to imagine the Chicago pizza. pizza in Chicago is pretty deep dish, right? And for me, that was the first pizza in the US. So that was the definition of pizza. But for the people in New York, probably that's not the definition of pizza. And some people liked pineapple on the pizza. I have to disagree with that. I'm sorry for that, but I don't like the pineapple on the pizza. But those are the preference, and they are not right or absolute sashiko. I mean, the pizza, it's different, but we can enjoy the pizza together. Sashiko is like that too. Each region, each family had their own stitching practice, and they had their own rules and culture. Yet right now it's simplified because not many Japanese people spoke up about it. And now one specific sashiko is introduced in English, and which is like the one specific pizza, let's say Chicago pizza, is introduced in Japan as the only pizza in the US, which is leaving the other pizza behind. So I hope that it makes sense by using this analogy. So I don't think the sashiko introduced in English is wrong, but missing a lot of part. And what I teach right now is that missing part. And many people find it very eye-opening experience. So that's why I can keep teaching too.
So do you teach mainly online or do you do in-person workshops as well?
That's a very good question. I tried to not to do online before the COVID because I wanted to maximize my in-person experience. I thought I had to check their hands in person. But after COVID, of course, we have to adjust our style. Now I teach online quite often, and I try to minimize the workshop in person because I would like to spend a little more time in stitching as well as for my family. So yes, I do both in person and online sashiko. I mean online, but more like it's online is more weighted right now.
Okay, that makes sense. I think a lot of businesses have moved in that direction.
Yep.
So since you're teaching people from mainly the United States and abroad, what are some challenges of teaching people who don't have deep knowledge of Japanese culture or language?
It's a very good question as well. One of the difficulties is that they expect the answers right away like this. So they come to the workshop to get what they want instead of like a pure learning experience. So, and there are a lot of information available there, and they believe that it's the answer, and they come to my workshop to learn how to apply it. But what I teach is quite opposite of what they can learn from books. As the result, we have to kind of explain that it can be uncomfortable for many non-Japanese people in learning process. And I try to make it like more entertainment as much as I can. We don't ask them to go through the very traditional Japanese training, which can be very hectic. I don't ask them to go through that. But it can be quite challenging for those who expect that answer is in dualism. It does not exist. So one has to keep practicing that to get what Sashiko is. Of course, I give my understanding of Sashiko, but it does not mean that they can get the answer for that. So entertainment is the key, I guess. Teaching has become the entertainment. Workshop has become the entertainment. And it's not happening only in the US, it's happening worldwide, also in Japan as well. But because of that, many people try to get what they want to get from the teaching. It might be a little interesting thing, but in the US, asking question is a good thing, right? It's the sign of respect, sign of the interest showing. In Japan, asking a question is a little last thing you might want to do. You might want to listen to the teacher first and then ask the question if it is offered. And I don't mind receiving the questions. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask questions, but that was difficult to teach what Sashiko is for those who does not really understand what Japanese is. I don't ask them to have a deep understanding. It does not have to be deep understanding the culture or language, but like a little basic or it's not it's not American, or it's not a Western culture. They are learning the Japanese culture itself. So that was a difficult. That is a difficulty for me to teach, I guess.
Yeah,
Because
I think
go ahead,
that,
go ahead.
oh, I just want to jump in and say, like, because I spent my childhood in Japan and then most of my life in the US, and now I'm back in Japan and I'm also learning a craft now from a traditional teacher. It's really different. The way that you interact with the teacher, you know, what is considered respectful in the West and in Japan is completely opposite at times. Can you give an example of like how traditionally, maybe in the past, how somebody would have really learned Sashiko? What would be the environment for somebody to really learn it in Japan?
Um, in Japan, we have a kind of system, or even the title for the artisans or craftsmen, which is shokunin. Shokunin means the craft person. There's tons of definitions for that word, but when I define the shokunin, there's one common things among the shokunin, those craftsmen people, they spend their whole entire life in one practice. For example, if it's the uh, blacksmith, they are doing just blacksmith from the beginning of their early age to the retirement, or even until they pass away. For example, sushi chef, they spend their whole life into one sushi practice. They don't go jump to this ramen shop next year. They will be the sushi chef from the beginning and ending. That was secured because that the Japanese could secure the younger shokunin's life throughout the life. So if they decided to devote their life, they would not be homeless, so they wouldn't lose their job. They wouldn't be they would not go to starve by doing one thing. So that's why there's a little unique culture that you have to sweep the in front of the store of sushi restaurant for 2 years in the beginning of the training. They will not be allowed to touch the fish or knife because that's a part of their training. Some people say it's not efficient. You need just 6-month program of how to make sushi. I agree with that. In order to get just proper techniques, probably 6 months is enough. But if we would like to understand sushi as the whole culture, those 2 years may be important. So to answer your question, if one really wants to be the master of Sashiko, they have to devote their life into Sashiko. Like that's it, that the one thing. At the same times, we do not believe that there is such a thing as master of Sashiko. I have never met anybody who say that they are good enough. So I think that's more like an attitude.
But that's only in Japan, right? The people who don't say that they're masters.
Yeah, there are tons of masters in English. They're representing themselves as masters in English. And I don't consider myself as masters. Like I don't know what is the title. People call me Sashiko artisans, Sashiko artists, Sashiko masters, Sashiko teachers, Sashiko storytellers, and I pick some of those things which does not make me comfortable. But I don't consider anybody. I'm just the ordinary guy who happened to be able to stitch.
Okay,
So
so let's say you were transported back in time and you were in Japan and you were teaching Sashiko, and you were not self-proclaimed, but you were a very experienced teacher. Then somebody may come to your house and instead of just taking a lesson, they might like sweep your house. You may help you clean your house first. That's how they would begin, right?
or they really have to be my child or my family. We have to do like legal step to make them my family. So, for example, my family never taught Sashiko to outside of my family. My brother even doesn't stitch. My uncle doesn't stitch. It was more like the one thread. Well, that's what my grandmother wanted to make one thread. And many Japanese traditions are like, many Japanese people are built on that idea, which is almost lost at this moment because of the difficulty of finding the next hair. But right. It's not for everybody. It's more like for somebody who really decided to be the person. But that's going to contradict because Sashiko is the stitching for the ordinary people. And I don't want to make it like that. I really don't want to pick one person to be the next heir of Sashiko. I just want to make sure that everybody can do it so that this thinking or belief, philosophy, mindset, practice can survive to the next generation.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing.
My
So-
pleasure. My
So,
pleasure.
We talked about some of the challenges of teaching people who are not maybe Japanese or have deep knowledge of Japanese culture and language. You have mentioned that there are many non-Japanese people teaching Sashiko. This is not to call anybody out specifically, but what do you see are some of the issues that arise when a non-Japanese person who maybe hasn't lived in Japan all their life, maybe if like what do you see as problems when non-Japanese people are teaching Sashiko?
Thank you for asking. Don't get me wrong. By talking like this in English, I sound like that I try to exclude all non-Japanese people from Sashiko, but I am doing opposite. I would like to involve everybody, so I want you to enjoy Sashiko regardless of who you are. So for that saying, I'm not saying that all the non-Japanese teaching Sashiko is wrong or harmful or annoying. They are actually good. My friends who are not Japanese are teaching. I encourage them to teach. Not many do that, but they are. I'm encouraging them to teach. There are two kinds of teaching in my understanding. One is like a guide. Let's imagine the teachers in the elementary school. They teach kids many things to make sure that they can experience through a lot of things so the kids can find something they like. And the second one is like a professor in the PhD. They are, let's say, math professor is teaching calculus something, and that's very specific, and they consider them as the profession. When one teaches Sashiko as like a guide, I think it's a very good way to appreciate or interchange or connect the culture. So I encourage them to teach if they're teaching Sashiko based on the fact that they don't know everything, but they know something, so they can share some of their knowledge. And the problem I have is the second one. When they define that they are the master and they will teach everything they need to know in Sashiko, then they are kind of simplifying the culture. Some teachers say that this is the one stop you need to take. This workshop will teach you everything. And that's a good marketing strategy. People wants to get everything. But those are my boundaries. It's not who they are, it's how they teach. I don't think I would like any Japanese who teach Sashiko as the everything. And I have never met anybody who teach Sashiko as this is the only Sashiko. So I have never met anybody who teach like that in Japan. So that's the line. I hope I can explain that clearly, but that's the line to your question.
I think that's really interesting, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But just to go over the point is, because you're inherently Japanese and you're culturally Japanese, I think the way that you think is that you infuse everything you do with a lot of humility. So you would never say I'm the Sashiko master, and because of that, you think a teacher needs to be humble and like. If any Japanese or non-Japanese person was like, I'm the one-stop shop master of Sashiko, then you think it's a bad strategy for teaching?
Well, that explained that they don't know it.
Yeah.
So if one say that I know everything about Sashiko, that's a good sign that they don't know anything. Not anything, but they don't know the most important thing.
Right.
That they don't know the spirit of Japanese craftsmanship. See, that's the kind of definition. That's a really strong word. So we can cut it off. I'm just kidding. You can go. We can go. We can go.
Do you have a problem with non-Japanese people teaching Sashiko and then making money from it? Or does it matter?
It does not.
Okay.
But usually those people who try to be a guide, they don't take that much money and they try to kind of support the very small suppliers. So I understand that, we have to make money out of those things. So the money itself does not bother me much, but what they teach as the whole is the things I care.
Okay, I think, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's move on to the topic. And
Yeah.
when did you become aware of cultural appropriation? Like, I know that this has been a progression since you spent, until your adult life in Japan. And was there a particular product or something that happened that you thought, oh, this is a cultural appropriation?
Yes. Before I begin that, I'm very new to this concept. I'm still learning it. I still don't know what it is. I am still learning from you or Emi-san or many other, like Makiko-san. But one particular thing was in 2019, 4 years ago, I was involved. I got tagged to the one social media group, and there was one lady kept asking me the same question over and over everywhere, to my email, to my social media direct mail, or she tagged me everywhere that I'm not answering what she wanted to get as an answer. And I kept explaining that you have to take somebody's workshop seriously, not asking the questions. Like the answer cannot be in one sentence. And after a lot of kind of explanation, she rephrased her question saying, well, it may be more accurate to refer to what she's trying to do as the embroidery. And my question was, well, why do you call it Sashiko then? That was my pure question, yet I just learned that later on in English, that can be taken as the accusation. Like, why do you call it Sashiko? It can be like, how could you say that? I did not mean that, but she took it that way, and many people on that thread took it that way. And I started getting a lot of comments with pretty aggression saying like, that's from the people in that group. I ask people to learn about Sashiko, yet I'm not welcoming their questions. What's the point of doing that? Or why don't you be happy? Why don't I be happy by them using the word Sashiko or being interested in Sashiko? And another thing is to stop overreacting. Sashiko is just a word. We can enjoy it. We don't like you just overreacting. And I felt little pain, but I kind of understood that their word made sense to me. But there were another people replying to them a little later that I am not overreacting. That is called cultural appropriation. And I started looking up what is cultural appropriation. Later that I learned that can be the microaggression, gaslighting. There are a lot of words relating to that. I did not know any of those words. And then that was the first time that I come across the word cultural appropriation. And because I felt something not clear, something muddy, something very unpleasant in myself, I started looking those information, reading a lot of books, articles. That's how I probably found you and Emi-san and Makiko-san on Instagram. But yeah, before that, I did not know what it was, and I would be probably the one who say that cultural appropriation doesn't exist. Before, if I were in Japan, if I did not come to the US as the immigrant, I probably would have said that the cultural appropriation is just BS, just it does not exist. But I do now understand it exists, and that's how I come to this world, this nice discussion.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry to hear that you had that kind of experience, but microaggressions and gaslighting is definitely part of this discussion. And I think many of us who do speak up about it encounter it on a regular basis through email and DMs and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm sorry you had to experience it, but I think that you have to live abroad to experience that. Because if you live in Japan, people aren't going to really come after you in the way that they do if you live in the US or in a white majority country mostly, I think. So yeah, I think so did you feel like, you know, this is kind of related, but like, so that happened in 2019 and 2020. There were so many changes that happened in the US, but like, how does your, this is kind of off, but how does your identity as a Japanese person and identity as a non-white person, maybe a person of color, how has that evolved along with your thinking about cultural appropriation?
Interestingly, until that moment, I did not think me as the POC, person of color. I married to the white Jewish lady, and my daughter is the mix of the white and Japanese, Asian. So I probably did not have a chance to think about it much. But right now, I am different from the main trend, especially when I communicate in English. I am like absolutely the minority. And even in those Sashiko's SNS, I am the minority. I'm very much minority, although I am from that culture, from that origin. And so it is changing my identity a lot. And but at the same time, that's another reason I cannot say that I understand the cultural appropriation well, is because I have not been through the pain as the other Japanese Americans who had been those very difficult time. I don't remember discrimination as a child because I was in Japan until 19. So I was probably the one who was discriminating others. So it's very new to me. And as the result, I don't want to say that I understand it. But I am trying to learn from others who went through a lot of difficulties and pains. So yes, it's changing. I am the Japanese who was born in Japan, but at the same time, because I can speak up in English and I do have topic to talk about, I probably should talk up. Probably should speak up, and that's the reason I'm here for.
So I noticed that sometimes you write your posts in both English and Japanese. And while my reading is pretty limited, I do sometimes use Google Translate to read out the difficult kanji. But I noticed that some of your messaging is maybe not a direct translation of what you wrote in English, but I know that you're talking to a different audience as well. But you do sometimes directly write about cultural appropriation in Japanese, and I'm wondering, do you ever get feedback from Japanese people about those writings? No.
Well, we don't really know about the cultural appropriation in Japan, and my Japanese friend do not understand. It's the same level. I am a little bit ahead of them because I read in English, and the Black Lives Matter was a very big change to me because without reading what was going on, without the meaning behind the word, I would have said that all lives matter. Like if I were in Japan, I did not know anything. I would say like, well, why only black? But right now, because of those not a contents, those stories behind it, I can understand it. But my understanding is just that much, just small amount of steps ahead. And in Japanese, at least in my understanding, we don't really understand, or we don't even the Japanese translation is very weird. Bunka no toyo is the translation, but stealing and using, is it appropriation? It does not really, it's not a, toyo is not the easy word for us to understand.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's definitely difficult to explain. I mean, I talk about this to my friends in Japan sometimes with people who are interested, and it's definitely has to be a long explanation because there's the historical context of racism and history of colonialism and like slavery in America, and like that's all related to how we have come to this topic. So it is difficult without the context. And if people in Japan, it's pretty monolithic culture, so I understand. But maybe things are changing. You'll help us.
I really recommend all the Japanese people to read what Emi-san wrote on the kimono is not a uniform
Yeah.
outfit. That's the excellent article that every Japanese people have to read when it comes to the cultural appropriation, because I can probably declare that 99.999% of the Japanese will not get offensive when non-Japanese wear the kimono in Japan.
Right.
They will just welcome that. It's not really offensive at all, but it can be offensive for those who went through difficulties outside of Japan or even in Japan because of the difference they had. We cannot ignore those words. We cannot ignore those stories. So it does exist, but we are not Japanese as we as Japanese are not educated enough to go through there. And as you said, I hope something will happen in the future.
So for those who are listening and you want to read the article, the article's written by Emi Ito, and it's called "My Kimono's Not Your Couture," and it's on the JACL web page. It should be under her profile. It should be a link there. So please take a look at it. And her other articles she has several that are really informative and very educational for me as well. So I know that you say that you're just learning about cultural appropriation, but if you were explaining this to a Japanese person, maybe without the historical context, but maybe with regards to like a product or like an attitude or like something, simplified, like how would you define cultural appropriation?
For Japanese, I will probably give up because we're gonna probably have to fight. We use a lot of black culture in our medias, and that's pretty bad. And they will not get it. Like my family will never get it. No. We love Halloweens for that matter. It's the day for the cultural appropriation, but they will do everything. And we like white. We kind of look up the white culture for that matter. So we will do pretty much everything to be like white, without no like hesitation or no no second thoughts. We just purely like that after the World War II. So I will give up. But if I have to define what the cultural appropriation, I try to follow the Emi-san's 3P: power, profit, and people. And also there's a YouTube videos by Kane Kawasaki. It's TED Talk. I can share the link later, but he also used the 3Ps, and it's the property, privilege, and profit. And those are, if they are crossing the cultural boundaries based on those 3Ps, two kinds of 3Ps, then we have to be kind of mindful about it. I don't know if it's going to be equal to the cultural appropriation, but we have to stop and think before we do something like that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to see the TED video. Please do send it to us, and we'll put it on our web page.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's see.
Well, if I can say one thing, this is from me as a Japanese, but I don't want anybody here, worried about cultural appropriation too much, especially in Sashiko. I want to call you Stitching Sashiko if you want to, and I'm sharing all the stories and live streaming and stitching so that you can enjoy that in a respectful way. But if there might be the case of cultural appropriation, which can be linked to what is happening right now, is more like a simplification. It's not appropriation, more like a simplification for the purpose of profit for them, with the privilege of the, let's say, language. English is a very strong power and privilege because we as Japanese cannot be on the same page as long as they use the English. By those people who do not know the basic of Sashiko, for that, it can be the cultural appropriation. And when I was writing this, I was reading my writing, and I used the 3Ps, right? Profit and people and power and privilege. So yes, that might be something happening right now, can be the cultural appropriation too, but I'm still learning that. Sorry, like, please go to I kind of added that, and I might confuse you for that.
Thank you. I think no, it's I like all the P's in defining how, how to explain cultural appropriation, because I think it's really useful, to have these kind of key concepts to explain it. So, since you live in the US, like, how do you feel about all of the products out there that have Japanese names that are not necessarily made by Japanese people? Like komebukuro, there's like zen, there's like mottainai everywhere, and like, how do you feel about the use of our words and culture for businesses?
That's a very good question, and I don't have a strong reaction to the. I don't have a strong reaction in comparison to the other people whom I speak about their perspective here. There's so many words that has been made based on the Japanese sound, a completely different thing. Hibachi is the restaurant here, but you don't have hibachi restaurant in Japan. Futon here is different from the futon in Japan. So things change and the word change, and we sometimes have to accept that. So for me, it does not bother strongly, because as long as it does not change the core kind of essence of that word, I think it is within the healthy change. I think so.
Well,
For
that's what
example, many people, like so many message I received when Nike released the Sashiko shoes. There's the like shoes which is not stitched at all. They just use the word Sashiko. Looks like Sashiko patterns. There's no such a thing as Sashiko patterns, but they use the geometric patterns like that, and they mean shoes. Many people worried me how badly I was hurt in the pain. I don't care. I did not really. Oh, that's interesting. The reason I did not react so strongly is that I knew that it was just a trend. Nike using Sashiko, the target the Nike has are not gonna be the stitchers. They are skaters. They're not gonna stitch. There might be some people may change their mind to decide to stitch, but they're not gonna stitch. They're just using the word as the marketing term, which is a very one important part of cultural appropriation. But for me, that was not that significant. So I did not, of course, write message to Nike, because I know that they're not gonna change the culture. But for those who think they know Sashiko enough, they might change the culture over time. So, for example, Zen is another good word. Zen can be the meditation, but if the Zen was used for the marketing term, I probably overlooked. But if somebody is teaching Zen as the meditation without proper understanding what Zen is, then I might take it as offensive or problematic. So as long as there are Japanese who can say about those things, as long as there are people who can talk about the origin upstream, then I think it's gonna be okay.
Do you ever tell your students that they can enter a state of Zen when they're sewing Sashiko, stitching Sashiko?
Well, we have to talk about Zen, then we have to define what Zen is, but Zen is not really the status. Oh, I'm sorry, then Zen is not a practice. Well, Zen can be the practice. Well, Zen is just the status, and Sashiko can bring the status of Zen, but we cannot make Zen as the purpose. So if you stitch for the Zen to be Zen-like, that's not a Sashiko anymore. That's different kind of thing. So
Got it.
well, we have to have another hour for explaining what Zen is, and I might not be the best one for that, but
okay, thank you for that. Okay,
sure.
So, let's see. So I think we're gonna ask this one question, and then we're gonna open it up for people to ask questions. So people who want to submit questions, please enter them in the Q&A. and we'll see if we can get around to them. But first, this is a question that we're asking all of the speakers. Like, where do we go from here? So how, like, are there ways for non-Japanese people to participate in Japanese culture respectfully? Like, what are some examples, and how can we move forward so that we're engaging with each other's cultures in a respectful way without appropriating?
The one word I have for that is the acknowledgement. This is the most frequent question I receive about this culture and Sashiko practice. So I made a video on YouTube, which can be jumped from the JCL page, JACL page, I'm sorry. But it's pretty much just one word, acknowledge the stories behind it. It sounds pretty simple, but that's pretty much everything I ask for. And after that, you can do whatever you want within that category. What I mean by acknowledge is that listen to be mindful for what they're doing and acknowledge it. And for that, you are acknowledging it already, so you are kind of free to go. They can do whatever they want. Surprisingly, though, there are many people who do not even try to acknowledge it, because that can be inconvenient to them. It might be troublesome to them. It might be too hectic, too time-consuming, too much trouble to go through. But as long as they acknowledge it, I think it can be within the healthy change. It can be the range of the healthy change. So, yeah, look, I'm worried about appropriating the culture. What can I do? Is already the question of acknowledgement. So for those who ask me that question, I say, please don't worry about it, because you're worrying it too much already. And don't worry about it too much. But if I receive the question that there's no such a thing as cultural appropriation, then I might say, like, well, be worried about that, because you might be crossing the line. But I think that's the acknowledgement is the key, and that might little bit link to that, but in the US, in English, or probably in Japan, but in modern society, we focus on the positivity too much. Being positive is very important, but sometimes listening to the story, acknowledging what it is, can be unpleasant or even negative. And if it's uncomfortable, we tend to define that as negative or aggressive. Then we tend to ignore that. So we have to be kind of mindful when we see something uncomfortable, unpleasant, because that might be the key to acknowledge it. And if I may to add one more, one way to protect, one way to preserve the culture from appropriating it can be the protecting the upstream, where the culture come from. It's my main topic recently, main theme. But you can copy what I do. You can copy any teachers. It's impossible to say don't copy it. It's impossible to hide everything in this world. If we hide something very important from the public, somebody will make the fake fact, or anything can be true. We can always look for the answer we want, and we will not. Well, we all Google several times, several words until we find the article we like. So to avoid that, I think acknowledging what is the upstream can be very helpful to avoid cultural appropriation. I believe no self-taught. I mean, there are many ways to learn by themselves without specific teacher, but those self-taught is also based on somebody's book, somebody's idea, right now probably YouTube or videos. So by saying that I taught myself, it can just shut down the series of those stories. So in order to keep the culture respected and sustainable, I think citing, they don't have to really introduce the teachers upstream, but they have to cite that where they learn from, and then culture can be protected from appropriating it. I hope it does make sense.
Well, just to get more specific about that, so if a person, let's say a person who has power and privilege is has been teaching Sashiko and like profiting from it.
Mhm.
And then they have a change of mind, or maybe their friend says, isn't this appropriation? Like, how can that person who has the power, who's making profit and who is privileged, how can they specifically, let's say if it's Sashiko, how can they acknowledge the stories behind Sashiko? And
Well,
what is the way of acknowledgement that would make it all right for them to continue what they're doing?
well, if they say if they admit that their teaching, their Sashiko is not everything, and if they list any of their teachers, or if they list the upstream, I think that's kind of the end of the appropriation. I am not trying to battle with them. I want to be friend with them because they are the co-workers or allies for that matter. But unfortunately, many people block my account. They don't want to hear what I say because it's uncomfortable for them. It's very against their profit, unfortunately, because if they admit what I say, they're losing their value or their essence in teaching, because if they have been advertising themselves as the answer, admitting that there might be something else can lose their customers, right? And that's the only case. Other than that, I encourage to enjoy Sashiko and even teach Sashiko for that matter, in their own way. I don't really try to control how they teach. It's just make sure that the way it comes from, it does apply to Japanese as well. There are many non-Japanese Sashiko teachers who are much more qualified than the other Japanese who is teaching Sashiko in English. So being Japanese itself does not qualify to be a good teacher. It does not really have to be Japanese to teach. How much they spend time in this practice, how much they stitch, how much they face to that, instead of how much they spend time in marketing or advertisement or making money, that matters to preserve the culture. So that's why I keep saying, like, the stitching itself speaks up. So the people who actually stitch has more power than any of us, including myself as the teachers. So I hope it answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to submit, you can send it to us in the Q&A box.
It's
And
not, that's good.
if there's anything else that you want to add to this discussion, Atsushi-san.
Sure. I try to be, how can I say? In my live streaming, I sometimes say much more honest way, aggressive way to do it, because I receive a lot of, well, I used to receive a lot of question with ignorance, and for me, not knowing itself is okay. Like we like, I don't know anything about cultural. I did not know anything about cultural appropriation 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So not knowing is fine. By us accepting that we don't know enough, we can go ahead. We can proceed. The problem is intentionally ignoring it, and surprisingly, there are a lot of not audience, but a lot of people, there are a lot of practitioners who does not want to learn from the Japanese. And surprisingly, I call myself as a stone in a big trend, but the big trend right now in Sashiko is based on the mending, like visible mending. I don't know I don't know how many people here are actually practicing Sashiko, but right now Sashiko is introduced as the mending technique or mending practice. No, it's actually not. Sashiko is not the word for mending. as I explained in the beginning, it's the stitchery for the making fabric stronger or warmer, which means that they stitch to avoid mending. Mending was an important part of Sashiko, but the whole purpose was to avoid mending because mending can represent some of the Japanese big taboo, which is shame. Like you don't want to have any, patchwork because it can represent some different condition from others, which can be financial difficulties, but they did not want to share those things to others. So they decided they wanted to avoid that. So if one teach Sashiko with those stories with pure understanding, and I hope, well, it's not a requirement, but in order to fully understand this, I think they have to talk to somebody in Japan, not me, somebody who does not know anything outside of Japan. They have to talk to them, and they don't speak English. I may be the first Japanese with this much experience in Sashiko with the somewhat proficient in English without the needing of translating in my brain. I'm not translating anything right now. I'm speaking out of my mind, but I might be the first one who does that. And unfortunately, translation can lose a lot of essence, especially the translator, especially when the translator is not well experienced in that practice. Translation itself is not perfect. So we have to be careful. But for me, cultural appropriation can be avoided by being acknowledged, by be mindful for what we do.
Okay, great. So we have a question. I'm not sure if you can see it.
What could someone that doesn't speak Japanese do to learn more about this history culture surrounding Sashiko? Thank you so much for the question. Well, just keep learning it. If I can be very specific, please choose the teacher who you are going to learn from. If the teacher is saying that I am the only one stop, then you can learn from them. You can learn from them, but don't trust that. If you can find any Japanese around, ask them. They might speak English. If they speak English, that's great. They might not know Sashiko because Sashiko is not a big trend in Japan, but they will explain some of the basic mindset philosophy we have. So you can start Sashiko right now, right after this, and you can call you stitching Sashiko, and I don't mind. We don't mind that. It's not appropriation at all to us. You don't have to learn Japanese language for that. I mean, that's gonna be helpful, but it's not a must. It's just I want you to keep listening and learning. And I don't want to call it humble, but less confident. Like we might be wrong. Like,
I think humility is a big part of Japanese culture. Maybe I think you've brought it up a lot in this hour.
yeah, I don't like it, to be honest. It's too to the extreme. It's like a little self-harm level. So I don't recommend them to be like that, but there are more stories than what it is right now. And please don't expect to have the only one answer. And I want you and anybody here who is listening to this talk to find their own answer about their stories or their practice.
Thank you so much for that. I am so appreciative of how much energy you put into like talking about Sashiko. Every day you have so many things that you write that are really informative and that are deep and sometimes emotional. And I really appreciate all that you do so that your voice and as a representative for the community that you come from, that you are not forgotten. I think it's really important. And thank you for sharing, your process and like the evolution of thought that you've had since moving to the US and having a family. And I really appreciate everything that you do.
And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being a great teacher. Okay, so I think Atsushi-san has another Zoom coming up. So if if you can catch that on his social media, if you want to hop onto that after this, you can feel free. And I think it's going to be more Q&A based.
Yep.
Correct? Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And I look
Thank
forward
you.
to continuing this conversation with you.
It was finally nice to talk to you in person.
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll be in touch.
Mhm.
おやすみなさい.
Oやすみなさい.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.